But just to maybe just say a few words about myself. Obviously, I'm a politician. I got elected in '92. I've served as Minister of State in the Department of Environment. So I've been kind of around the block, and I can see the flaws as well as the achievements of government. I've been involved with a couple of pretty difficult political issues. I mean, like abortion, like the settlement of travellers. And as a consequence, when I was identified with those issues, I got a fair bit of hate mail and kind of mail from people who were very agitated about whatever it was that was they perceived that I was doing. And just the reason I'm making this point is because I've begun to get a little bit of, not quite hate mail, but the same kind of agitated, neurotic, disturbed kind of email coming into my office as a result of the profile I now have on climate change. And I was interested to see that Minister Gormley, when I mentioned this, has the same experience. And that's telling me something, because for a long time climate change was not seen as an important issue politically. It was, it was a bit of a graveyard. I'd been in health, and health was, of course, in everybody's lips. And then suddenly I was in another area, energy and communications. And it seemed like nobody was too bothered except for the kind of nerds like Peter Brennan that cared. Now that has changed, and I think the public concern, let's say anxiety, even at a time of high anxiety because of our financial economic situation, there is concern there in relation to climate change. And the fact that over the last few days parts of Ireland have been flooded and people's homes have been invaded by floods of water, I think has added to that kind of light switching on. The light in my head switched on actually when I listened to Brendan Halligan speaking about climate change, and I suddenly realised that this is the big one politically. And so I think that there is a kind of public consciousness shift. And to meet that, we have to have leadership. And I don't want to be sort of going down the road of they're not doing this and they're not doing that. But I can see very clearly that what we do need, all of us, is to ensure that there is good political leadership and that there is a robust, coherent, cohesive approach that has a statutory base to meeting our responsibilities on climate change. And that has really focused my mind on the issue of climate change law. And the process began from our point of view in the Labour Party back in January, where we published a bill which was sponsored by the Labour Party. It was, we didn't expect anybody to actually pass it, but we did expect people to maybe look at it. And it was our offering to the debate. But very clearly, we had to go much further than that, because this is above politics. Political parties, whatever their colour, are having to face this particular issue of how do we lead our country through what is a major challenge. And, just quote Sean Barrett, who's chairman of our committee, Fine Gael. This message must go out and clear to whomever is in government. Long after we vacate these chairs, there'll be another government in place. But unless we work together, we'll not achieve our goal. That's not very common language in the political world. We tend to be very, adversarial, and that's the way democracy works, and we all accept the rules of the game. This is different. This is our Northern Ireland, but probably, I'd have to say, on a larger scale. Even though at the time, in the height of the violence, nobody thought we could have the political leadership to get out of where we were, we showed that we could, and others showed political leadership as well. So Sean Barrett, as chairman, asked me to be rapporteur to produce a report on climate change law. And with Peter Brennan, we produced this report, which first of all analysed really the comparisons between whatever laws were out there, well, in the English-speaking world, because we don't speak Hungarian, although I noticed we did get a bit of Hungarian, but certainly in relation to particularly the British experience, which is closest to us. And something I learned when I was in government was that actually we model a lot of our laws on what happens in Britain. I mean, housing policy, it was remarkable how there was just a mirror image working itself out here. But it was an interesting model. it was interesting that what happened in Britain was different to what was happening here, in that it was the business sector who sought the law because they want certainty. Perfectly reasonable. They're making long-term investment decisions. They want to know, will things change if another government comes into power, and are they going to find that they've lost money? That's what actually, it seems to me, quite apart from political considerations, it was business, hard-nosed attitude that actually drove the provision of law in England, in Britain. It was a very good and welcome move when the corporate leaders in Ireland got together and did exactly the same thing, spoke to the Taoiseach, made out a case for climate change law. I have to say that their position was essentially identical to what had emerged from the Oireachtas Joint Committee, the Joint Oireachtas Committee, which is an all-party committee which produced this report. So again, there's this very clear, strong message. We need law, we need it urgently, we need to do it in a different way than the way we normally make our laws. And in fleshing out the detail of this law, we actually went quite far. We designed what, I suppose, strictly speaking, legalistically, we'll call the explanatory memorandum. And the structure set out in the explanatory memorandum of the bill is that the targets will be set, and that the way that government would work would be on the basis that the Taoiseach, as head of government, would take primary responsibility for making sure that everybody was working in the same direction, no matter what department you were operating in. I mean, there's a clarity of the hierarchy in that proposal that I think we shouldn't lose, because I'm very concerned that it may be lost because of interdepartmental rivalry, because of the old silo mentality, which was very evident over and over again. Every time this committee has had presentations from different departments, it's clear that there is not the kind of synergy that we desperately need if we're going to make the big shift, if we're going to move the tanker around. And that was one of the reasons why it was clear to us that you must devise a new structure, a new system. The Taoiseach would be the head of the actual project. There is an office for climate change and energy security within his department. It would have an overarching role in terms of the different departments, because, you know, at the moment, DOE are responsible for this particular project, but actually it's transport and agriculture that are the big sinners. So you're not going to get that kind of synergy unless you create a structure that is very clear and is led from the top. That's not to say that you don't have effort at community level, because obviously local authorities and the rest have to be part of the national effort, to put it mildly. The inspiration of this came from our experience in relation to Northern Ireland, because one was that you could have an all-party consensus, and that the Taoiseach was leading that consensus in terms of particularly the British government, but also the communities in Northern Ireland, the representatives there. But it also has inbuilt into it an accountability, which doesn't apply to any individual minister, where the Taoiseach comes in twice a week and answers questions within his or her brief. Now, at the moment, you can ask a few questions about climate change, and I have done so. Are you going to Copenhagen, Taoiseach? If you are, will you do this, will you do that? Will you please go with the legislation in your pocket? Because that's a strong message that we also wanted to give to him. But other than that, there isn't that accountability, that openness, that constant scrutiny that you could have in relation to Northern Ireland, that you still need in relation to Northern Ireland, because things aren't fully resolved there. But that is an important piece of the jigsaw. So the Taoiseach, the office within his department, drawing in the expertise from SEI, from EPA, and a standalone independent commission that would have a kind of monitoring role, that would be in a position to bring forward documents, assessments, plans, that would also be part of this integrated system that we have to put in place. And departments it would result in departments being given certain targets, And, the carbon budget, the accountability to the Dáil is all designed in order to ensure that public and private can actually reach their targets in a way that is actually going to be robust. Because at the moment, it's actually quite difficult to get an overview. I mean, the EPA do a terrific job, and they've had a major challenge in terms of the ETS, but it is actually difficult to get an overview as to what is working, what isn't working, what the culture in a particular department is, how they actually view climate change targets, as opposed to all the waffle and the guff that you get with your reports and your glossy things. I wouldn't doubt for 1 minute that the Minister for Environment is committed to this project. And I think it'd be very important that we don't start to challenge that. And indeed, I have been reassured, frankly, by the attitude of the Taoiseach. So it can't be, though, left to individuals. This is about a system of governance that is new, that we need to bring about very quickly, because if we don't have the statutory framework, we're not going to deliver on the targets. It's just not, I don't think it's conceivable that we can do it without that cohesive approach. There's also the private sector who can see, very wisely in my view, that there are business opportunities. They need to have the kind of statutory regulatory framework that is up to the mark. There's a lot of areas. Geothermal is a classic example. There's no legislation to deal with geothermal. Who owns what about the rights of landowners, blah, 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 blah. That should have been in place by now. But it's very much out there in the wind somewhere. So there is a legislative job of work task to be done. It's not something that can be left to one government or government and leave out the opposition. It has to be done in a very unified way. And that is, it goes against the grain. And, it concerns me now, because I did make a sort of a pitch, fairly blatant pitch. It wasn't terribly sophisticated. This is the report, Taoiseach. When you're going to Copenhagen, please have the heads of the bill published based on what is an all-party consensus on how we're going to tackle climate change. Simple idea. Give it to the Attorney General. It's robust. I'm confident that it can be translated, at the very least, into the heads of a bill. But commit to the structure that's within it. That's what we need to hear. And I'm concerned now that that isn't going to happen. What we're going to get instead is a scoping document where many good people are going to be working to produce a document before Copenhagen, produced by the Department of Environment, just one department out of many that have to take this baby and run with it. And it's going to get bogged down in, how can you draw up legislation where you're dealing with transport and agriculture when you're a Minister for Environment, without raising hackles in another department, without blockages, this thing, as far as I can see, is going to go into a swamp in terms of producing a bill. Either it'll take a long time and battles will be fought and blood will be shed, or else we'll come up with a very innocuous bill, which is not what this country needs or not what the world needs. And we have a moment. I mean, Copenhagen is wonderful. It's a deadline. I used to be a writer. I never could do anything until I had the deadline facing me. And this is a wonderful deadline to have Copenhagen. And even these meetings, I'm amazed so many people have turned out, frankly. But it is an indication that there is there's a dynamic at the moment. And if we lose that dynamic, and we all know that it'll be a political agreement, very likely, rather than a legal agreement, and that's very disappointing, but we also know it's going to be significant. And certainly, if it can be a significant political agreement in Copenhagen, that leads the way then to a legal agreement, and please God, before too long. So Ireland we can play our part. We can do something, in my view, that would stand out in the sense that we would have a government saying, this is all-party agreement, this is the law we need, we'll work out the detail later. The heads of the bill flow from the explanatory memorandum. The Attorney General has looked at this, tweaked it if necessary, but these are the fundamentals. Regrettably, I'm nervous now. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll be a very different approach being adopted. I may be wrong, but I tend to, if I'm pessimistic, I usually find myself being right. But I would still argue the case very strongly and trenchantly. I don't think we can do this unless we have a totally new approach. I don't think we can do it unless the Taoiseach drives it, because that's an indication itself that this is different. This is a national effort. This is us doing something we've never done before, except maybe, when we gained our independence and had to set up a whole new set of structures. Maybe when we set out to resolve the issues in Northern Ireland, it's on that scale. And this is, I would hope, and I'd be very interested to hear your views, I would hope, because all parties did engage in the process, because we had expert advice in Peter Brennan, that it can stand up to scrutiny, and I hope feed in to what is going to emerge as climate change law, whether it's before or after Copenhagen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.